Welcome to the April 6th meeting of the Utilities Advisory Commission. We are meeting in hybrid format today. Looks like we've got just a couple of folks in chambers. Why don't we go ahead and start with roll call? I will, as usual, read out commissioner names in the order I see on my Zoom screen. Commissioner Bowie.
Present.
Commissioner Johnston.
Present.
Commissioner Smith.
I'm here.
All right, I am here as well. I don't see any other commissioners. I don't see Vice Chair Siegel. I don't see Commissioner.
Chair
Yes?
Purcell, Commissioner Metz is here in
Oh,
chamber.
thank you so much. Yes, it's a tiny screen for me. Thank you for speaking up. I don't mean to leave you out, Commissioner Metz. Commissioner Metz.
I'm present.
All right, and Commissioner Scharf and Commissioner Siegel, please pipe up if you're there and I skipped you.
Chair Purcell,
Yes.
Vice Chair Siegel, and Commissioner Sharp will not be attending the meeting this evening.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. All right. Let's see. We've got a fairly substantial agenda today. I don't think we have any revisions. So I think we can go straight to oral communications. If there are any members of the public wishing to speak on a topic that is not on today's agenda, now would be the time to do that.
Is there anyone from the public in the Zoom webinar calling in that would like to make a comment? If so, please raise your hand or press *9 if you're calling in. Okay, looks like no speakers.
All right. Then we will turn to the minutes from our March meeting. Are there any suggested revisions to the minutes? All right, nobody's speaking up. In that case, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the March 2nd meeting.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnston. Do we have a motion to second?
I'll motion to second.
Thanks, Commissioner Bowie. Then we'll do a quick roll call. Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
and I approve as well. So we approve the minutes of the March 2nd meeting. Moving right along then. We have no unfinished business from last month's meetings, so we can turn to the Utilities Director report.
Great, thanks, Chair Purcell. Evening, Commissioners, Councilmember Cormack. Starting off a little bit, we have our annual walk and mobile gas survey that's starting this month, where we actually break the system in the city in half. So half every year. So this year, we're actually going to be starting in the north side of town, which is a walking survey for walking from the main into the side of the customer's home to the gas meter. And then there's a driving part of it where they actually drive the mains. And in the downtown areas, they're done every year. So once the survey is complete, it's over 200 miles of gas main and pipeline that have been checked. And then we review those and see if there's any gas leaks that were found. And then we document those. And according to the Department of Transportation and CPA use policies, we grade those leaks out and then we'll repair them within the grade period of time that's necessary. If someone was looking for a survey map of if they're in the northern section or the south section of town, it could be found at cityofpaloalto.org/safety utility. There is actually a survey map there. A little bit of update on the drought. Statewide drought conditions are the worst as they have ever been for the months of January through March period of time. They're still right now at the regional water system, we're about 73%. Normally we're about 81% of the San Francisco, and they expect to fill Hetch Hetchy Reservoir with the runoffs. However, there's uncertainty associated with the state curtailment in terms of how much runoff SFPUC can store. Palo Alto reduced the water usage of about 3% from July 1 of 21 through March 31 of 22, which is relatively to the 2020 levels. However, again, as I mentioned, the January through March records have been the driest, and cumulative water usage in Palo Alto is about 11% higher in the same months in 22. City Council approved the water restriction in stage 1 plan for cutbacks up to 10%. And the latest of that information can be found at cityofpaloalto.org/water. Council approved the electric hydro rate adjuster in March. As of April 1st, residents and commercials have seen a 1.3 cent kilowatt hour increase in their bill, which is about $5.89 per month average single family. And the charge is expected to remain necessary since the hydro generation levels start to improve. As we move forward, we are going to the finance group on April 19th and then to council to get the 23 budget approved. We'll be talking a little bit more to them about the hydro rate adjuster at that period of time. We had 3 events on electric vehicle events in March. We partnered with Acteria and Ride and Drive Clean. We hosted 3 EV events, one on 101 webinars, a neighborhood EV expo, and then I included also was a financial incentive workshop. This is basically to raise awareness about electric vehicles, e-bikes, and other electric modes of transportation. We have 3 more events that will be coming up in April. Sunday, April the 10th from 3 to 5, we have a one-on-one workshop and EV showcase at Mitchell Park Community Center. On Wednesday, April the 20th between 5 and 6, there's another online class on that. And then on Saturday, April 23rd from 10 to noon, e-bike workshop and test rides at the Mitchell Community Center. There will be invitations sent out to this next event. It's a little bit of time off to the UAC as well as to council. Saturday, June the 18th, we're bringing back popular demand. We're going to come back and have an open house at the MSC. Multiple departments from ourselves to Public Works, facilities, police, fire, community services will be involved. We'll be demonstrating and displays activities from all of the departments. So you will all receiving invitations as we get a little bit closer to that. But again, it's going to be Saturday, June 18th from 10 to 2 at the MSC. And with that, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Batchelor. Do we have any commissioners with questions about the director's report? Great, we'll move along. So let's see, we have 5 items of new business today. The first should at this point be familiar, a resolution authorizing the use of teleconferencing so we can do these hybrid meetings. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? Please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9. No speakers or hands. Thank you.
All right. Commissioners or staff, any discussion on this? Otherwise, we'll just go straight to a vote.
I had one question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Metz.
Yes, is the state of emergency still in place? Is this resolution necessary? I couldn't understand that from reading the text.
I believe so, but it'd be great if somebody from staff could clarify.
Yes, Commissioner Metz, this is Tabitha Boatwright, the Administrator for Utilities. At the moment, the city is in a hybrid mode, which means we are required due to the state of emergency to maintain this resolution. So in the event that commissioners cannot come in person, they have the ability to split in person and virtual. So that's what this is for. And the same with council, they do it every meeting, just in case someone cannot attend in person.
Thank you. I
Thank
understand.
you. Let's see, do we have a motion to approve adopting the resolution?
Motion to approve?
Thanks, Commissioner Smith. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnston. Commissioner Bowie,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Smith,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
and I approve as well. So we can maintain that into next month. Next item is a discussion of the status update and preliminary financial business models for Palo Alto Fiber. And let's start by seeing if there are any members of the public wishing to speak on this topic.
Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? Please raise your hand or press *9. No speakers or hands raised. Thank you.
All right, then looks like we do indeed have a staff presentation, so let's go straight to that.
We do, Chair Fussell. Good evening. So we are going to make a short presentation tonight. Dave Yen, our strategic business manager, and John Honker from Magellan will be giving a presentation tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave Yen.
Good evening, Commissioners and Councilmember Cormack. I think we came here about a year ago, in April of 2021. At that time, we presented two business models for fiber to the premise. The first model was a city-owned ISP or internet service provider. And the second model was a partnership model where the city will partner with an ISP provider to provide the internet services. There are both advantages and disadvantages to both models. Under the city ISP model, the city will have total control of the service offering, price would be higher under this model because we would be on the hook for the full construction costs. And we also would have to hire staff to fulfill all the operations and the maintenance of the network. Under the partnership model, we would reduce save the city some costs because the partner may contribute to some of the construction costs. And they also would provide staff to fulfill some of the core functions, both technical and operationally. However, then the city will have to relinquish some control of the service offering. Again, quality of service, pricing, and so forth. And we also would have to share revenues with the partner under that model. So we came to the UAC and the UAC recommended that we pursue only the ISP model because we wanted to keep the control of the service and the offering and also the pricing. And also in the long term, I think under the city model, we would be financially better off because we wouldn't have to share revenues with the partner. So tonight we bring to you two ISP models, city ISP models. One is 100% in-house staffing, where the city would be responsible for everything from the technical and operational side of it. And the second model is a hybrid, I guess, or it wouldn't be half, but a combination of insourcing and also finding some strategic partners to outsource some of the core functions where we don't have in-house expertise right now, and also where we may need during full deployment. So tonight we have John Honker from Magellan. He will be presenting both these models to you. Let me turn it over to John.
Great, thanks, Dave, and good evening, commissioners. It's a pleasure to be in front of you again this evening and providing really a status update. And really, this is more of an informational update about really the progress that's been happening behind the scenes as Magellan and the city staff have been working through, as David mentioned, the business models, really starting to fine tune those and understand what the best mix of, utilizing existing city resources where we see opportunity, but also, leveraging specific, strategic vendors that can potentially take some of the heavy lift away from the city in the early days of the network, but then also work with the city where they're more cost effective in circumstances to manage certain parts of the network. So David mentioned sort of this in-source versus in-source outsource model. We'll be talking about that and kind of bringing you up to speed on what we've found as we've been looking at those two and some of our core recommendations on that. Just a quick agenda. We'll try to keep the presentation relatively short tonight because we want to open it up to Q&A, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time as we're going through this as well. But we'll talk a little bit about a status update on if you remember, phases 2 and 4, which are the engineering design and the business planning, as well as the community engagement. We'll give you a quick update on that and the progress complete. We'll talk about that business planning process and the alternatives that we're working through and the pros and cons of those. And we'll show you what those costs look like today in today's world for operating the network. And we're really focusing at this point in this, looking at the staffing plan. We're pulling together full pro forma financial plans for these different scenarios, which are in the process. But what's important tonight is to really focus more your attention on really just the concepts of insourcing some staff versus outsourcing staff and using potentially a blended model that gives the city the best of both worlds. We'll also go through some of those numbers and most importantly, an updated what we call bill of materials and the capital costs for fiber to the home, and then talk about the next steps. So just a quick update on the 3 sort of components of the fiber expansion project currently. So the engineering design for the fiber backbone and for fiber to the home is past its 60% completion. We're moving on to what we call the 90% completion phase, where we are truing up all of the construction methods, the sequencing of construction and working with the city's team to determine the best ways to build the quickest and most efficiently with minimal community impact. On the business planning side, we're about 75% complete. We've really gone through a full analysis of staffing, a full analysis of in-source versus outsourced costs, as well as a lot of those operational costs. And we're diving into really governance structure now and looking at things like, how would a broadband utility be managed? How would the board be governed? How would the departments be governed, and how will they operate specifically in the competitive environment, which is going to be different than, the electric environment or the city's the general general fund. So, looking at those nuances between, how the city does business today and in a competitive market, how it will need to potentially adjust some of those controls to be a little more flexible. And then of course, the engagement and outreach, we can talk through that. We're about 50% complete with that. Survey is effectively almost ready. We have not set a specific date for launch, but we're looking at sort of that second week of May right now. But plenty of runway if we need to move that date out a little bit further if possible. So
Mr. Honker, just a quick question. Engineering design 60% complete. Does Magellan do the engineering design, or does Magellan contract that out to another engineering firm?
No, we do all that in-house.
Okay.
So yep. So we've got a team of about 6 engineers in our brick and mortar office that are working on Palo Alto nonstop, and then we have in the field for all the what we call constructability analysis. We have a team of about 4 field engineers who are walking all of the routes and really looking at conditions in the community, looking at the poles, assessing, how the network can actually be constructed, really 1 foot at a time. So you've got a team of about 10 just dedicated to the Palo Alto project, just working through the engineering now, Chair Purcell.
Thanks. Good to know.
So on the business planning, again, we talked a little bit about this, but where we've finished our analysis really and looking at these different business models, really on the business operations, management, customer service, billing and finance, sales and marketing, network operations, tech support and engineering, right? How all of those core functions of the broadband network can be managed by the city, and then identifying both the internal resources, right, new staff, or potentially outsourced vendors to be able to manage each of those functions. We used, one of the key things that we looked at as we dug into this was, Palo Alto's existing, salary bands and your labor overheads, right, which are high. We know they're most munis in California are high and similar to what we see in Palo Alto. But how does that then compare? How does that work financially as we bring these numbers together in the pro formas? And looking at those, we did find opportunities where some strategic vendors can fulfill a role for a lower cost than Palo Alto, and we'll go through those in a few minutes. Regulatory review. So we're actually going through all the state requirements and federal requirements that the city would need to meet becoming an ISP, an internet service provider. And we'll be getting together with legal and HR this coming week to review those requirements and make sure there's a good plan going forward. Make sure your internal teams understand what those are from each one of the state and federal agencies, and also what resources it's going to take to manage those on an ongoing basis for Palo Alto Fiber. The third item is a pretty important one, right? The governance model around broadband, and I think this is something we'll also tackle on starting on April 13th with this first meeting. What does the actual management tier of Palo Alto Fiber look like? Like I mentioned before, we need to make sure that the business is agile enough to be able to move in the competitive environment. And if that may mean making some changes to how the city typically does business around procurement, around policies, around salaries, around hiring. So we're really working through those different, business functions to, one, determine how Palo Alto does it today, and two, does that work in a broadband business, or does that potentially need to be adjusted? Some of the other items are policies, procurement, and rate setting, right? How do rates change? Right? Is it a formal process? Are there more levers that can be pulled in a quicker pace than the traditional rate setting process that you have in, for example, the utility, right? The regulated electric utility. Broadband is not a regulated environment, so there's more flexibility, but we still need to work through that, I think, with the city to determine what the right governance model is. The preliminary pro formas and financial plans is really the crux of the business planning, that we're effectively complete with the first draft of your pro forma financial plan. Right now, it's a draft, and the numbers are going to change over the next 30 days, depending on really a couple of things. One, how the governance models enter into that, and also how financing enters into that. How will the city potentially finance this project, and what the best structure for that financing look like to match the financial requirements of Palo Alto Fiber. So in the next meeting, we're going to be going through a more detailed financial review of the full pro formas. What we'll be showing you tonight is really a preliminary assessment of some of the areas in the pro formas. And then finally, the final pro formas, where we'll have a fully baked financial model that could be potentially taken to the markets to get funding, whether that's bonding, revenue bonding, or geo bonds, or other forms of financing, COPs, et cetera. And as we looked at the business planning, like I mentioned before, one of the key aspects of the business planning is trying to identify where you have existing resources, right? So we don't necessarily have to have new hires in every department for broadband. And the existing resources that are out there today, you have finance and accounting, right? That there's some finance and accounting work that's going to have to happen to run the broadband business, right? In terms of billing, in terms of account management, keeping separate books from the electric utility and the general fund, and as well as just general management. So we do see some overlap there where some of the city's existing resources, both human and system resources, can be utilized. For example, the billing system. Can we utilize the existing electric billing system for broadband? More than likely, there's some opportunities to do that. Will it still take some investment? Yeah, typically it does. But we see most utilities that are, or most cities that are building, utilizing some portion of their existing finance and accounting systems. So customer service, we also worked through that with the CPAU team to identify some existing customer service reps and supervisors that could be used to carry some of the broadband call load as that's happening, and then some legal as well. Where do you have new hires? Sales and marketing is a brand new department. That's going to be something that is really core to the Palo Alto Fiber. Right, as in any business, if you don't have a sales and marketing team, it's going to be difficult to be successful. We think that needs to be an organic department, meaning that the city should hire for that because it's so core to the organization and everything that is going to be Palo Alto Fiber. Almost every broadband city that's offering broadband has their own internal sales and marketing department. Now, and that doesn't have to be large. Typically, that's 2 to 3 people. Sales and marketing manager, a commercial account manager that handles mostly the larger business accounts, and then a residential account manager. Where else do we have new hires? We think in operations management.
Sorry, you said it was okay to interrupt you as you go. Can I interrupt quickly?
Please, yeah, absolutely.
How is a commercial account manager for the new fiber going to be different than what we already have for our existing fiber ring?
Sure. So
that's a whole extra hire.
And it may not be. This could be actually. It's a great point because you possibly could utilize existing resources for that, or it could be you could actually potentially have a joint residential and commercial sales manager or sales account manager, because what you guys have right now for your sales in the Palo Alto Fiber business is really kind of like a large account manager, right? They're selling to mostly larger businesses, dark fiber, right, to Stanford and to other entities that are out there. That it's a different kind of a sale. This is going to be more like a small and medium business service that you're providing internet service to. So it's a different function. May not be a full, but we want to plan for it. But great question. Thank you. The other area is field services. Again, field services really is tasked with managing the outside plant, just like your electric linemen and your outside plant maintenance folks are managing the electric infrastructure. You're going to want to have folks managing the fiber infrastructure. There is a little bit of overlap there, but these are also dedicated resources. It's hard to get a lineman to be doing both fiber and electric at the same time on 2 different critical infrastructures. So we would expect some hiring there. Also in customer service, because the typical load on a customer service agent from broadband is much higher than electric. So for example, they take 4 times as many calls an hour than an electric CSR does. You're going to want to bolster your existing customer service pool with some new agents. And then service quality control, really, as we look at the overall services being provided to the residents and the businesses, ensuring that you're meeting service level agreements, and also that the network is delivering what it promised and what Palo Alto Fiber's promised to the community. That's really a core function that is just pure quality control. Now, on the strategic vendor side, let's think about some of those commodity services, right? Where there's a commodity service such as tech support. Some of these can be outsourced, right? And in these cases, tech support, overnight customer service, network design, these three are really technical services, and they are incremental in nature, or they're variable in nature, meaning that you don't need a fixed service all of the time. So we can use, for example, a strategic vendor for overnight customer service, right? For call overflow during a third shift between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m., we can definitely bring in a vendor to be able to manage that, at a much lower cost than Palo Alto can staff that currently. Network design and tech support, very similar technical services that can be potentially outsourced. Construction, we always, recommend construction is outsourced, right? The large construction contract, Palo Alto wouldn't hire for its own construction needs, but also construction management and inspections. This is a really important part as you're building what will be eventually $100 million network. You need eyes and ears on the ground to make sure that construction vendor is doing what they're supposed to do, and the network is being built to the standards. Just as if you're building a new substation or you're building new electric plant, someone needs to have eyes on the construction contractor to make sure they're doing their job. And when those invoices come in, those are actually being charged for work that's been done, and it's been done with good craftsmanship and good quality. So these are all opportunities to outsource. So the pros and the cons of some of this outsourcing, we should think about this in terms of the end result to the customer, right? The pros are, in the most cases, are achieving lower costs, where private sector overheads may be lower than Palo Alto's existing overheads, or where a vendor can share a pool of resources to provide services to Palo Alto. The con in that is, a risk of you're losing some control, right? You're contracting with a vendor, and there's very qualified vendors to do that do this every day. But in some cases, you're losing some control because it's not an internal function, that you're managing day in and day out. We can mitigate some of those with strong service level agreements with the vendors. So for example, let's talk about the tech support, right? So let's say we outsource some of the residential tech support, the more technical, the higher value in the more technical aspects of customer service. Well, we would expect, the customer to be contacted right away. We would expect that, they would stay in contact. We would expect that you'd have resolution within 4 hours on general technical problems. So there's going to be a certain level of service that has to be maintained with those with those vendors, and that can be built into the contract. So there's penalties for non-performance. But we always have to be about managing those vendors, right? Because that really will, if we don't, it will impede service to the network and to the customers at the end of the day. So we want to really look at what covenants we can put into our contracts with some strategic vendors to be able to provide the same level of service that Palo Alto would be providing if it was providing, sourcing those staff members directly.
Mr. Harger, can I interrupt for 1 second and ask a question?
Yep, please, Commissioner Johnson.
So have you kind of evaluated when you're evaluating the pros and cons of outsourcing, are you also looking at kind of the speed with which the system can get up and running and be fully functional?
We are. So that's one of the things that we do think is an opportunity on the front end. And we see a lot of cities will do this as they're building their networks. Rather than trying to insource everything from day one, they'll use strategic vendors during the implementation phase to build the network, to, integrate, to beta test customers, to bring on the first customers, typically for the first year or two, because they've done it before, they've been through it. It's very I don't want to say it's cookie cutter, but there's a lot of lessons learned along the way that vendors who have done it understand it, right? They know how to fix problems, and they know how to avoid a lot of the roadblocks. But that gets handed over to the city after a certain amount of time, right? So during the really critical phase, the first couple of years where you have to ensure success, those vendors just provide a crutch to help the city as you're growing, because you're going to be building this massive network, right? Massive construction project. And at the same time, you're going to be building and connecting customers and making sure those customers are happy, because you're not going to build the network all at once and then connect customers. You'll be in construction and you'll be connecting customers, after the first, say, 12 months of the network's being built. So it becomes has to be a well-oiled machine, and those vendors kind of help grease the wheels to make sure that happens.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think it's critical here that, as we start to roll out the service, it's going to be very important that it be high quality from day one, or we're not going to get people to sign up. So I think having experienced people, presumably from outside vendors, experienced people to help get the whole ball rolling, I think makes a lot of sense and will ultimately make the project more successful.
Yeah, we would definitely agree with that. And here's what that may look like from an org chart perspective. So this is really what the draft org chart looks like today for Palo Alto Fiber. We've spent a lot of time with Director Batchelor and Dave's team working through this and identifying the resources that would be needed. So I'm going to review this with you just for a couple of minutes so you understand kind of the layers, and then we'll talk about how this org chart could change, utilizing those strategic vendors that Commissioner Johnson was mentioning. So at the top, we have an assistant director of Palo Alto Fiber, who is sort of an assistant GM for the fiber business. Under that resource, there's a tier of management, sales and marketing manager. And under that, like we were saying, Chair Fussell is the res and biz account manager. Residential and business account manager. So that really is the sales team. That could grow over time a bit, but we think, given the size of the network, we think that, a two-person team would be sufficient to cover the Palo Alto market. The engineering and operations manager is really responsible for ensuring that the network is built and maintained, and that services are provided based on the quality that Palo Alto is going to guarantee. So under that, we have network engineering and design. We have then the folks who are actually going to be operating and managing the system and making sure services delivered to residents and businesses. You have network engineers, and you have what we call network operations center techs or technicians. Those are the folks behind the scenes that are managing all of the equipment and making sure services stay up. Within that operations team, we also keep the customer service supervisor and then customer service reps. And there's some opportunity here where there are existing resources in the customers in the call center pool that could be utilized for that tier one sort of account management, first call resolution support. But we think 3 new reps are going to be necessary to be able to manage the volume of customers over time, and also some of those higher level, internet specific functions, right? How to deal with internet customers and how to troubleshoot issues. Separate from the engineering and operations, the field services manager is really responsible for all outside plant operations and maintenance. Anything that's on the poles in terms of fiber or underground. Under that resource, we would have 2 maintenance techs and 3 installation and service techs who are responsible for plant maintenance and also customer installations. And in that area, you'll probably have some additional outsourced vendors here. Just almost every city that deploys broadband uses a vendor to supplement their internal staff for installations. But this is a very high touch function. This is the tech that's actually going inside the house, working with the customer, right? Putting the booties on to make sure that the carpet doesn't get dirty, helping them set up their new internet service, troubleshooting their old internet service, getting the remote controls working. So it's a really high touch function, which is important because you want to have some of those people in house. They just need to be Palo Alto Fiber ambassadors. You want to have, strong representation there inside the home. But there's also a number of firms out there that do this for a living, and they're very, very good at it. So we think it's a combination of existing or of some new hires, like 3 installation and service techs, and then some vendor FTEs that will supplement what the hires are doing. And then on the financial side, we have the revenue and accounting manager, and a billing tech under that, just responsible for billing questions, prorates, discounts, managing the billing system effectively. And there's some opportunities to share resources with existing utilities. So on this side, the goal would be to allocate 25% of these costs to the broadband side, and then keep the 75% of the costs on the electric side. So this is really your fully insourced platform. We're looking at about total of 24 full-time equivalents, 24 new hires at the end of year 5. And again, that could shift a little bit forward, or it could shift a little bit back, depending on how quickly the network is built, right? The quicker it's built, the more customers we can get on, the faster these hires will have to come on board. If it's a slower rollout, then, maybe it buys us a year and a bit slower staffing plan. The outsourced version of this, so we'll focus down here mainly in the engineering and operations, because this is where we see the most opportunity to reduce staff if we're going to use strategic vendors. So you can see the green boxes where we are adjusting the FTEs and outsourcing some of these functions. So we talked about network design, your network operations center folks, and some of your customer service reps. So we're able to basically pull about 5 people out of the engineering and operations division and be able to outsource that, or actually 6, and then potentially 1 out of revenue and accounting and billing. So the opportunity we see is about, versus 24 in the insourced model, we're looking at about potentially 17 in a hybrid model. One difference between these two also is we can start with this model potentially and then migrate into a fully insourced model down the road. This is what Commissioner Johnson was mentioning before, starting with a strategic vendor where we have some insourced staff, but a lot of those functions are taken care of by a strategic vendor as Palo Alto is learning the trade. And then those new folks can be hired over time to replace that vendor after the first couple of years. Or I think you also have the flexibility to just maintain that strategic vendor if they're doing a good job for you. Because in most cases, if they can do it at a lower cost and the quality is acceptable, the savings is pretty significant. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute.
Sorry, John, can I interrupt you there for a minute?
Yeah, sure thing, Commissioner Smith.
Can you help us interpret these 2 charts? I think what you're saying is between insource and outsource, we're going to need 24 total people.
Correct.
In order to run the entire operation. But if we adopt more of an outsourcing model, perhaps we adopt an outsourcing model in the initial years, we can start with a lower population. I think that's what you're saying. But in total, we're going to need 24 people.
Yeah, effectively. So in the outsource model, effectively, we're not saying how many people that vendor is going to have specifically, because they're going to staff it a little bit differently. They staff in more of a shared pool of resources than dedicated individuals. But in terms of FTEs, you're exactly right. We're looking at 17 if we outsource. 17 folks that are employed by Palo Alto Fiber if we use these strategic vendors. If Palo Alto Fiber is going to hire it all, we're looking at 24.
Understood. And as I look at the outsource model, one of the changes is odd. The customer service supervisor would not be necessary. That would be, who would own customer service if we followed the outsource?
So this was, as we understood, this would be shared with electric, meaning that customer service supervisor would take the management of the vendor. So for example, that supervisor would manage your outsourced customer service firm. Okay. And then you would just have 2 internal CSRs to complement what they're doing. Okay.
Thank you.
And those numbers can change a little bit, right? There's a lot of different variations. This is kind of just one iteration of it. But the idea would be wherever you have an outsourcing opportunity, instead of that staff doing the work, like the management staff above those resources, that staff is now managing a contract, right, with that vendor. So for example, the engineering and operations manager is managing an overall contract that's supplying customer service, network engineering, network design, and just general operations, right? Managing the contract with that strategic vendor. Or it could be more than one, it could be 2 vendors.
Noted. Thank you.
Sure. So as we looked at the difference, this is kind of what we had developed as a comparison between the insourcing and outsourcing on the staff. And again, we're going to focus mainly, this was really the hardest part in the business planning, is really to assess the overall staffing costs in these different models. So we wanted to first baseline the city's existing costs by looking at, salary band of a similar position. What is an electric employee making today? What is a comparable broadband employee going to make? And then, load your overheads into the model. And this is really what our staffing for insourcing looks like on an annualized basis, starting in 2023 and going for a 10-year stretch. So we're starting around 2 million and growing to about 6.5 million after the first 5 years. And we consider that sort of the maturity year for the broadband business, right? After a full 5 years of operation, your staffing costs, they're still going up because there's a little bit of a cost of living increase happening annually, but they're not growing considerably during the sort of the implementation phase. So we'll see those leveling off after the first 5 years and then growing at about 3%, 4% a year. On the outsource side, we see the opportunity to reduce costs to be about 20% or 15 to 20% overall. So the blue lines on the chart show the reduction, and then in the table you can see we start out at our same, in 2023, we start out at our same internal costs, because you're going to need to hire the core people for the broadband business to get the construction started, right? But then over time, this is going to diverge because, for example, in 2024, we're not hiring as many CSRs or not technicians or installers that we are if we were insourcing. So there's about $500,000 savings in the first year of providing service. And then that continues, year after year as the network grows in maturity. over time. And the way we looked at this was to take some existing contracts that cities are using out there and really break them down into the functions that we were able to identify for outsourcing on this graph, and then really look at those, in current dollars, and then project those forward. So, again, we think the opportunity is to potentially save some on the operating costs, which is pretty substantial, right? We're looking at, after the first 5 years, we're looking at about $700,000 in savings, growing to about $800,000 in perpetuity after the 5-year term.
Well, Mr. Hunker, could I, again, just a clarification on this chart? When you talk about the line that's the blue bar, total staffing outsource, does that assume that 100% of the staffing for the fiber utility is outsourced? Or is that just outsourcing those key functions that you had in the green boxes on the prior slide?
It does. Just outsourcing these key functions that are in the green boxes.
All right, thank you.
And quick follow-up question, how are you accounting for the cost of the contractors and vendors? Is that already include, does the savings, is that net of having hired outsourced contractors?
It is, yeah, Sheriff herself. So effectively this line here in the total staffing outsource includes all of the contractors, or let's say the strategic vendors. So it's effectively this chart, right? So the city's 17 FTEs plus the outsourced vendors that are performing the functions that you see in the green boxes. That sum.
I figured, I just had to double check.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thank you. So I think, the savings is we see the savings as an opportunity. We really have to vet vendors, though, to determine overall quality levels and make sure that quality isn't compromised by outsourcing. So as we get closer here, it's going to be important to really identify some of the vendors, if that's the route the city wants to go, and understand those capabilities and make sure we do a good job of really doing our due diligence on them to make sure they're capable.
One other question, Mr. Hunker. You mentioned that you had sort of estimated the cost savings by looking at existing contracts with other cities that are outsourcing to vendors. What cities are you referring to?
Yep. So we looked at, the prime ones that are out there today providing outsourcing are like the city of Chattanooga. So Chattanooga EPB is providing outsourced services on a per subscriber basis. So meaning as every month, if you want to utilize or you want to utilize Chattanooga for customer service, they charge you $10 a sub or $8 a subscriber. So we looked at 3 cities that are doing that today and averaged those costs year by year. And that's, again, based on the total number of subscribers. So
sorry, is Chattanooga the city that's the customer? Or is Elias Chattanooga is a vendor and 3 cities are using Chattanooga as a vendor?
Exactly. So Chattanooga is the vendor.
So who are the cities that are contracting with Chattanooga? That's my question.
So Bright Ridge, Johnson City, Tennessee is contracting with them currently. Newport, Tennessee is also contracting with them. And there's one more off to get the name of, but there were 3 different cities that we looked at when they were currently contracting.
Are cities in Tennessee using a Tennessee-based vendor a good comp for Palo Alto?
Well, we put a contingency on there. So for example, Chattanooga's pricing is about $10 per subscriber for all of the services. We increased that by 30% to account for any of the potential increases in California. Again, for those services, if they were providing them out of the East Coast or anywhere else outside of, let's say, Palo Alto, there's no direct cost increase, but we realize that you may want to also utilize a vendor that's closer to Palo Alto. There just aren't a lot of cities that are doing that right now in California or on the West Coast. So we also looked at two sort of comparable city vendors that were utilizing Chattanooga, and they're all sort of in the East Coast area. So there's not a significant amount of comps for this type of service. It's not been there aren't a lot of different cities. So we may want to also look at some of the private vendors that are doing this in the California area to just compare their costs as well.
Yeah, I'm worried I'm worried there might be a nasty surprise if Palo Alto tried to contract. And I guess some of the functions can be done remotely, but you mentioned customer service or installation reps putting on booties. And I don't think you can pay Tennessee prices.
Oh, no, yeah, so Chair
for some of those functions.
And that's actually a function that would be done locally. So for example, the folks that are in the home would be a local vendor, and those have been priced as part of the construction contract in California rates. The services that we're looking at here are really mostly virtualized. So when you look at most of these services, this is almost all back office in the green, which it could happen in Palo Alto, or it could happen halfway across the country.
Got it. Okay.
So just moving on from the sort of the staffing piece of this, we're also working through the build schedule for the fiber to the home network. And this is what that build schedule could look like, on a 5-year basis. So one thing that's really important as we start developing the final pro formas is, of course, the take rate, which will be teased out of the survey, but also the build schedule, right? How many customers we can pass, or they can have access in how much time, right? And we looked at potentially a 3 to 5 year build schedule. Again, it will depend on the final construction sequencing. One of the important goals of this would be to get as many customers connected as quickly as possible, because that's going to start generating revenue and help sustain the financial requirements of the network. So as we're working through the last parts of the engineering design, what we want to be looking at is how do we front load construction in areas, still keeping some of trying to equalize construction across different areas of the city. So we're not just building in one concentrated area. We think that's important for you just to have sort of equity in how the construction's happening. But we also want to really focus on looking at aerial construction first, because it's much faster than underground. In Palo Alto's case, we're thinking, at least 2 to 3 times the mileage can be completed in aerial construction versus underground construction in the same time. So if we look at this plan here, we'll be looking at potentially connecting about 26,000 residential customers at the end of the 4th year. We averaged the 3 to 5 years, and about 4,000 business customers. So in your city, you've got about 30,000 total premises, residential and business, that'd be connected over the 4-year period. And that's going to grow a little bit as just there's a little bit of additional growth in the city, but it's hitting that 26,000 residential and 4,000 business is kind of the mature number. That's the last year of construction. When we forecasted the take rate, we were very conservative, right? Because we wanted to wait till the survey came out to understand final take rates. But this is what it would look like on an annualized basis with a growing take rate up to 32%. And this is actually pretty conservative because we're reaching that 32% take rate after 5 years. We don't have anything in the first year of construction. We're assuming that is all just pure construction, no customer connections. And then you'll start to grow, slowly, 3% take rate in the first year, 10% in the second year, up to 19%. Now, these are cumulative numbers, 19% in the third year, 27%, and then 32%. So the big years of adding customers would be years 2, 3, and 4 to the network, which you can see down here what it looks like in terms of how many customers we're connecting per day. And this is how we come up with the needs of the FTEs that are managing the network. So for example, your
Sorry,
high.
sorry, John, could I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure, Lauren.
They're assumptions. I get that. These are assumptions that are building the model. And I assume that the reason why we were so conservative in this is that if we could make the model essentially break even or profitable with very conservative assumptions like this, is that the thought process?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The goal is to really let's ratchet down all of our assumptions to the bare minimum.
Right.
If the model works on that basis alone, even before we have exactly. And I think the way we really want to do this is, for us, it would be valuable to do a low, medium, and a high, or let's say a break even, a medium, and a high. So this would effectively be your break even model.
Okay. I agree. And I absolutely appreciate that. And I agree with you that doing you could call it low, medium, high. You could call it best case, worst case, ideal case. The one question that I had, and this is related to your underlying assumptions, on the residential customers passed in year one, we say 6,500 residential customers are passed on year one, and we're not going to turn on a single one. Is there, in your engineering, have you discovered that the fiber that is currently in place, would it support any residential customers today if we simply just started offering residential customers today?
It would be a bit challenging to do, but I think what we can do, and this is sort of once we get to the 90% design, it's all about phasing construction. So I think what we look at, Commissioner Smith, is, if we want to get 6,000 customers connected, or at least be able to start hooking them up, right, in the first year, let's look for our opportunities to build right around the existing fiber and right around the facilities, right? Because if we can build around the huts, the shelters, right, that we all looked at, a few months ago, then we can start connecting those customers right away and, accelerate this whole timeline. So, I mean, if we can really do that in year one, even if you have just a few customers, right, in year one and you're beta testing, you're going to get a surge in the second year as you continue that construction. So that's really going to be the next phase of the engineering, is to say, how quickly could we connect customers given what we've got today, and bringing the new construction in as quickly as possible.
I would applaud that effort. And similar to our discussion about having a low, medium, and high, or best case, worst case, ideal case, it would be worthwhile, I think, to do that soft opening case, that beta case, identify those customers that were adjacent to the shelter, adjacent to the POP, that you could turn up in a relatively quick period of time, but turn them up with the notice and understanding that, look, service level agreements are not going to be in place for the next few years. We're going to have outages, and you just need to be aware of it. We're using your home and your premise as a test case, and we ask you to test it with us and test the service with us. But get those customers up, and get them up and operating again to increase the viability of the product, one, but also just getting, to your point, getting the neighbors excited.
Yeah, well, and a big part of this is just the optics of, if you've got people in the neighborhood that are hooked up, even if it's a beta test, I mean, they're going to be people will know about it. That neighborhood will know that there's live customers in there. And then, you can even do things like having a service van go around with a laptop and having people test service just so they know, hey, it's up and running. You want to test a gig? Bring your phone over and connect to our wireless router. There's your gig, right? And they can speed test right off of their phones. So there's lots of little tricks to do to speed up the deployment and really kind of get the neighborhoods kind of moving a lot faster. But I think we would definitely want to do that. And we may want to look at maybe, there's 3 to 4 huts that are going to be located in Palo Alto. If we can pick 2 of those to start and, think about building out from them, where you're building the huts and then everything that's around them immediately gets connection. We can bump this up and potentially get customers connected in 2023.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. And again, this is a conservative schedule. So, you still have 65 to 70% of the plant that's aerial. So, if we can focus on most of the aerial first and leave the underground till later in the project. So let's say the first 2 years are all aerial, and then we leave the underground to the next year or year and a half. We may be able to get most of the aerial done much quicker than the underground. Now we need to look at where that is and if there's any sensitivities around, where those deployments are, but it'll definitely speed up the construction and customers getting on the network. Any other questions on this slide? So we wanted to just provide just an overview of what the costs look like, where we're at right now. And what this table is really just showing is what our original estimates were from early 2021 and where we're at today. Now, I think the elephant in the room is COVID has changed 2 things: the supply chain and the availability of materials. Labor has not inflated to the degree that materials have, but we have injected some additional contingencies in here because we know that material costs are higher. For example, conduit has gone up about 50%. Anything that's petroleum based has gone up about 50% in broadband networks. Fiber has gone up about 40% as well. And then there's a lot of smaller materials, but that are very, very important that have gone up quite a bit or are very difficult to get right now. So what we've done is we've actually increased, based on what we're seeing in the market today, we've increased our construction contingencies from 20% on a lot of those key materials to 40% to accommodate some of these supply chain issues that we are seeing. So for example, in the fiber backbone, our original estimate from early last year was 22 million. Now we're at about 25.5 million. On the fiber to the home plant, we were at 85. Now we're about at 98. So it's about a $12 million increase or $13 million increase on the fiber to the home, and on about a $3 million increase on the fiber backbone. What we were able to do as we got deeper into the engineering was we identified some additional cost savings, though, if the networks were built together. So if you remember, the fiber to the home network and the fiber backbone network, they overlap in a lot of places, right? They're going down the same streets. And if they were to be built together, the savings means that we wouldn't have to trench 2 sides of the road. We could put everything into a single trench, 2 different cables, one for backbone, one for fiber to the home. And that creates some savings along a lot of these construction routes. So we were at savings of about 4.5 million. We've actually now at this point found about 8.7 million in savings if the 2 projects were completed together. So that offsets some of the cost increases, but not all of them. We kept the working capital static at this point at 12.5 million. And again, that working capital is really just to get the system up and running operationally before you have revenue to cover the costs, right? New hires, systems, internet content, et cetera. So and again, these are projections based on what we're looking at today. Our original costs were about 116 million. We're about at 128 million now. So the way this would be, so the cost increase because the materials all in is about 12 million total. And again, that could change, right? We constantly watch what the markets are doing. We constantly watch this big suppliers of commodities and of things like fiber and the very specific items that we need to build the network. And things are shifting around. We're not seeing any normalization right now in the supply chain on fiber. 12 months from now, if you were starting to place orders for this, that could change. So we need to really take a hard look at the timing and start to hedge our bets against future supply chain disruptions versus what may improve in the future. We think we'll start to see some visibility around that in Q3, which will be sort of about the same time that we're coming back to you with a fully baked financial plan, and that then will eventually go to council. So I would expect these numbers to change again. I would expect the 128 hopefully to come down, because I feel like we're still going to find some savings in the construction costs, potentially on the labor side, as we get through this final phase of design. And if you remember, the way that this would be funded would be to utilize the existing fiber fund that's out there, which has a balance of about 32 million, a contribution from the electric backbone of 10 million, a contribution from electric for their use or their capital contribution to the electric, the fiber backbone of 10 million, which gives us a total balance of 42 million of available funding. And then our new funding required under the original estimates was 73, let's say 74 million. Our current estimates are right around 85 million. So again, about a $12 million increase based on those materials issues and supply chain issues.
Commissioner Bowie, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I had a question on the funding side. So in addition to the supply chain costs and labor costs of COVID, we have also seen large influxes of infrastructure money from the federal and state levels. Are those things that are being considered now? I don't know about anything about our eligibility, but in terms of the financial plan, are they being considered now? And if so, do they have some sort of time frame that is going to be quicker than what we're currently looking at? Are we going to miss an opportunity on anything that's out there?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question, Commissioner Bowie. No, you're not going to miss an opportunity for sure, because we're tracking that almost daily now. We have our VP of funding who's in Washington on the Hill that is in every week with the agencies who are working through the funding. So we're looking at the federal and the state funding. So the state of California, as you probably know, came out with a pretty significant infrastructure bill of its own, partly for rural and partly for urban. Now the rulemaking isn't complete yet, so we're watching that every day as well to see what's coming down out of the CPUC, because that could determine your eligibility for funding. I believe there's some funding out there. I don't believe it'll be a silver bullet for you, but again, if we can offset some of these costs, even if it's 20%, it really helps. And again, I think there's money out there, there's at least $1 billion out there for urban communities. And we're hoping the broadband threshold to be eligible for funding will be 100 megabits, right? And typically it's been, less than 25 megabits in most of the rural communities, meaning if your community doesn't have, if your community has more than 25 meg internet services, you're not eligible. And in a place like Palo Alto, that's difficult. But when the bar is set higher at 100 megabits, that changes the game, because I think as we look at some of the customers in Palo Alto, some of your citizens, there isn't 100 megabit access. And the I think the most important part that the Treasury actually built into this plan was they use words like reliable and guaranteed and consistent when they talk about the speeds. So the traditional broadband funding was based on the access technology, right? Meaning if it was DSL, well, it was 25 megabits. But that's changing dramatically now. And it's more about, is the service providing a reliable and a consistent 100 megabit? And if you can prove that it's not, or you have evidence that it's not, then you're potentially eligible for funding. So we're working on that for you as those rules are making their way through the CPUC. We should hear something in early summer. And based on that, we want to get you ready for prime time, right? Get you ready so that if that when that rulemaking comes down, you're in the best position to move forward and go after the funding as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions on this slide before we move on to the final 2 slides? Oops.
Go ahead and move on.
Great. So finalizing the financial plan. This has just been really an excerpt of where we're at in a snapshot based on the current level of design. The next step will be really finalizing the financial plan, which we had talked about, looking at the potential financing requirements, final construction costs, final operating costs, the best model, insource versus sort of a hybrid insource outsource, and then bringing that back to the UAC in advance of that joint session in August. So the goal will be to have those final estimates ready for you based on the engineering design, what those projections on material and labor increases are going to be over the next couple of years as we benchmark that against some of the existing metrics. We'll inflate those by a CPI and adjust construction contingencies. Can we find some ways to hedge our risk and hedge those higher commodity costs early by potentially reserving some materials even this year if the project's moving forward? Again, as the survey comes out, we'll be going through that final take rate and the rate schedules that would be based on the survey. One of the things that we've been actually working through as well is a potential deposit program for residents and businesses that want to, potentially show their, true interest by putting an earnest money deposit down. So we're going to be working with the engagement team to look at some ways other cities have done that, how much they've asked residents to put down. These, of course, would be refundable deposits, but, by doing that and maybe doing that in the survey process or after the survey process, or even before the survey process, could really help gauge true interest and a little bit more skin in the game in terms of, putting real money down for an early sign up. So we're going to come back to you with some the options on how that could be done and what the team decides on, what the number would be, how much the deposit would be, and then how it would be potentially rolled out. We'll work through the final pro forma income statement. We'll also have you a full borrowing summary with the schedules as we meet with finance here over the coming weeks. We're going to work with them to determine what that optimal financing strategy is. And again, as Commissioner Bowie said, if the funding is out there, we'll do a secondary model that looks at what the balance of funding would need to be if we can go after those grants. And then finally, really a sensitivity analysis and a business risk analysis, right? Because forecasts always change, right? And pro formas change. So we want to spend time looking at what the most sensitive variables in the business line are, and adjusting those both up and down to determine really what the highs and lows are going to be for the financial plan. So that's a preview of what's to come as we finish up the design, the engineering design, and the business planning. I think I covered this already. As far as next steps, finishing the engineering, the additional customer engagement, which is happening now. Estimation of take rates after the service has been developed, the survey has been deployed, finalizing the financial plan, and then developing the governance and regulatory plan alongside your legal and HR resources. And really getting ready for that study session in August. A lot is going to happen between now and then, but really we want to spend the next couple of months really vetting out financials, making sure you're comfortable with them, and then looking at that final decision whether to utilize those strategic partners, and if the grants are available, putting an action plan together to go after that money, and which will come out in late 2022. That's the last slide in the deck, so I'd love to open it up to questions from the commission.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Honker. Commissioners. And Commissioner Bowie, then Commissioner Smith.
I'm just trying to figure out the way to properly phrase this, but this project is occurring against a wider backdrop of electrification and major infrastructure changes that would come with that across the city. That seems to me as another place for potential synergy in terms of planning and potential reduction of costs, just sort of aligning trenching and project plans a little bit further down the line if we do end up going that route. Nothing has been set in stone there, but is that something that would be considered in any of these, or something that could later be factored in if we were to move in that direction in a wider electrification plan?
I think it does. We've looked at some of that already, Commissioner Bowie, and we found some opportunities. But as we get through the final engineering, we're going to have, road by road fiber routes for all the underground, which if there's opportunities to get into those projects while they're happening and the timing works, that's great. That's perfect, because we all know how expensive it is for underground construction in Palo Alto. So every foot that we save in underground is $900 effectively that we save on the project, and that adds up quickly. So I would really, we want to encourage sort of a collaboration with the city as we look at those undergrounding districts. The key is coordination, and we're dealing with this in Boulder right now, where we found a great opportunity to build in this North Broadway corridor, which is like 3 or 4 miles of underground construction, but it's like solid rock. So it's very expensive, just like we have in Palo Alto. And we're able to build there, but challenge was the timing of the projects, right? So the city's project is moving very slow. The broadband project is moving very fast. And the construction contractor was delayed because the city was not ready for the fiber to come in yet. So I think what we really have to do is, it's got to be almost a two-way collaboration with electric, so that there's good synergy when the construction's happening and the timing, and there's no dependencies. That's really what we have to kind of focus our efforts on.
Yeah, if I may, John, if I could just add a little bit onto that. Commissioner Bowie, I think John is right. I mean, the biggest thing that we're thinking about right now is the coordination between these two major projects. And I'm not sure, we are in the process right now of working with a contractor on the electrification aspect to take a high level look at the areas that we'll need to identify and work on first. And where we're going to electrify might not be in the same exact location of where this aerial work may be. Underground circuits may be needed more than some of these overheads. But I think the thing is rest assured that We are going to look at the detailed engineering work that John's team is doing and overlay that over the top of where we need to look at for electrification. So where there is synergy that we can look at boring extra trench lines, we're going to take advantage of that as much as we can, so that we're not ripping streets up 2 and 3, 4 different times out there.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Chair. I think my question is for Dave. Dave, do we have an updated number of individual residents that have signed up through the Fiber Hub with expression of interest?
Oh, I don't have that number, unfortunately. Megan and Amanda probably has that figure, but I could get an update for you and send it back.
Please.
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Metz, did I see your hand in the air?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Yuan, Mr. Honker, thank you very much for your presentation. Since this is stated as a business plan, which is 75% complete, there were some, at least to me, some missing ingredients that I would like to ask about, specifically 3 questions. I think the first thing is, where is the competitive assessment, particularly what will be our response to competitors? My number one concern is that there's a risk of retaliation by the incumbent broadband service providers. I think this is a big risk, which I don't see as having been addressed. And also more recently, I'm seeing new competitors entering this space with different forms of technology. So I think it's really important that that be an ingredient in the business plan. You taught, my second question addressed market assessment. I think you have touched on that. I think my main concern is the take rate of 32%, which you described as very conservative. To me, that seems actually aggressive, to be taking a third of the market against 2 large entrenched competitors. Doesn't strike me as conservative. I guess we'll have to get the data to see what turns out. But I think that's the key thing, to get the data about what services customers want and what they'll pay for them. I think the third question I had in terms of a business plan is, where's the technology assessment, especially what are we doing to address risk of technology obsolescence? I'm particularly concerned about the obsolescence of the curb to house fiber drops. This is represent a very large fraction of the cost of the overall project. And I've explored this with communications experts, with folks who worked for me in the past. And it sounds like 5G wireless could be financially and functionally very competitive with what we're proposing, and actually functionally superior, because it allows somebody to connect a resident to connect their internet with the cellular network. So, as you indicated, I'd expect to see all these answers as feeding into financial pro forma. And I assume that will be at least like a 10-year pro forma with P&L and cash flow. But I would hope it would incorporate these other issues around competitive response and technology. So, with due respect to the work that's been done, which I feel is strongest in the operational side, I would like to see the business plan addressing these 3 key questions: competition, market details, and technology. And I'd be happy to discuss any details.
No, thank you, Commissioner Metz. Those are all going to be included in the final plan. The reason we don't have the first 2, really the competitive assessment and the market assessment, kind of what those take rates are now, is we usually like to bring those up to leadership once the survey's been done, because it gives you a much better sense of what the existing marketplace looks like, both on what existing services are out there and available and at what prices, but then what are the behaviors of citizens and businesses? Who's subscribing to them? What prices are they paying? How satisfied are they with them? And most importantly, what is the preference in terms of brand, speed, and price among those providers that are out there versus Palo Alto, right? That's really what the guts of our survey will do, is it'll inform the market analysis of what are they paying today and what are they getting, but also what their affinity is for the different providers, right? And we're actually introducing in the survey Palo Alto as the other brand, so we can test the brand equity of the city, and then also be able to measure both speeds and prices, right? And measure for preference. So what you'll see when that survey is done is really a matrix of existing providers that are out there today, what they're offering, and what market share each provider has in those different speed tiers. 500 megabits, 300 megabits, 100 megabits, and then what Palo Alto should be setting its rates at and its speeds at to be able to capture as much market share as possible. That's really the guts of the conjoint analysis. We use a choice-based conjoint analysis to tease out that information. So that'll be coming to you in the next run of the final business plan. On the technology assessment, it's important, right? I mean, we see Verizon in Sacramento doing their 5G trials and their wireless to the home, or wireless last mile, they call it. There are still a lot of challenges with it, but it's a competitive opportunity for another technology to potentially come in the place of fiber. Now, what we do see is that in the current versions of that, you need a fiber to every other home or every third home. So it still takes a lot of fiber to have those last mile wireless solutions deployed, which means, it's still a lot of fiber that's being deployed. What's also important is if another emerging technology comes about while Palo Alto is deploying, there's no reason that you wouldn't switch over to that. That's right. You're not buying everything off the shelf from day one. So if there is another emerging technology, I think what the business plan has to focus on is, okay, let's define what those are. Let's watch for the evolution and the adoption of those technologies. And as Palo Alto is building out, make sure that you're on top of the game so that you can start deploying those and be as competitive or more competitive, because you're an entrenched provider, to be able to deploy those, faster, quicker, and cheaper.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing the discussion on those three topics.
I also want to add that we have been contacted by local startups and ISP providers, and they're also interested in partnering or seeing if there's any kind of strategic synergies. We haven't reached out to them yet. We're still finishing our business case. So there will be opportunities to engage with these other new technologies and providers as well.
Commissioner Bowie?
Yes, I was also just going to reiterate a point that we discussed before about brand differentiation based on privacy, data handling, local control, just kind of the way the internet is handled. That may be something that is attractive to customers in Palo Alto in particular.
In the survey, we will be asking some of those questions about what's more important to the Palo Alto residents and businesses, and local control, privacy are part of those survey questions. So we'll be gauging the importance of that, how we differentiate ourselves.
Are there any other commissioner questions or comments? I think my own have been covered by other commissioners. I share Commissioner Metz's concern for uptake rates. I just don't know how many people out there, residents and commercial customers. It would be great to have more data on what services they have available, what they're using, and whether they're satisfied with it. I'm generally wary of surveys. I mean, I guess you'll do your best to ask good questions. But I continue to be worried that people will dash off some responses. You mentioned potentially doing a deposit or taking deposits to indicate real interest in participating in Palo Alto Fiber. I thought that was a great idea. And I think it's worth mentioning, since it seemed to be early in the presentation, one of the key questions, the sort of hybrid outsourced model, it makes sense to me, especially hearing that most of the outsourced activities are things that don't need to be local and are entirely virtual. Feels like a decent opportunity for some cost savings, although time will tell. And I guess, Councilmember Cormack, did you want to say anything?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair Forcell.
Go ahead.
So understanding that you all be making a recommendation to come to council, I just wanted to add a few thoughts, questions. As I recall, part of the reason for us considering this was to have customer service potentially be a differentiator, not just cheaper. So I encourage you all to incorporate that into your thinking. And if that's not going to happen, we should at least address it. I don't understand who will make this outsourcing decision that you've described. Is that a council decision, or will that be made by whatever governance is put in place?
I think it will be discussed at the governance level and then we brought to council for approval. So we will.
Okay, so when you say governance, let's just be clear on, are we going to have a board that runs this?
We haven't figured that out yet, unfortunately. So we are
Okay.
going to be meeting with legal, ASD and
Dave, it's a
HR.
little hard for me to hear you. Maybe they can hear you better.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. So we'll be meeting with legal, HR, and also finance in the next week or so to start these discussions. So we'll bring up some of these models, hopefully at the joint meeting,
Okay.
maybe even sooner if possible.
And then my quick back of the envelope math, because if I don't do it, Councilmember Phil Seth will when it comes to council, is that if it's $700K a year in cost savings, then, and you average that out over 10,000 customers, that's $70 a year, which is about $6 a month. So anything, when this comes forward, anything you can do to show those costs, the same way we do with utilities in general, I think will help all the decision makers better understand the trade-offs. And then finally, could someone refresh my memory on the potential source of the $86 million funding gap? Were we planning to bond that? Certainly we won't get all of it from other federal or other governmental entities.
Yeah, we haven't figured that out, but we are looking at all the different options, bond financing, borrowing from other utilities if possible. We also looked into the electric special project reserves, if we can borrow from there, and then we'll see how much more revenue that the fiber fund could generate in the next few years as well.
Between now and then. Okay. All right. So again, we have about a third of the money already available. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. I think that concludes our discussion of this topic. Thank you very much, Mr. Honker, Mr. Yuen. Why don't we, let me see, we usually take a short break about halfway through, and I think we're at that point. Why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break and return at 7:50 to do the rest of the agenda. See y'all back in 10 minutes. Johnston, if you're there, go ahead and turn your cameras on.
Commissioner Metz will be right here.
Say that again, please.
Commissioner Metz will be right here. One second.
Okay, yep,
There he
I
is.
see him walking in. Perfect.
Yep.
All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get restarted? Our next item is a discussion of wastewater CIP and the update on the utilities quarterly programs report for Q2 of FY22. And I see there's a staff presentation.
There
Yes.
is. So, commissioners, Chair Fasel, typically, as you well know, is we don't usually do a discussion around our quarterly updates. When we use, it's just usually an informational item. However, tonight we thought that we wanted to have a discussion with you to discuss the future of the wastewater and around the CIP. And we wanted to bring this to you early on. There's some long-term planning that we need to discuss. So that's why you see the wastewater CIP in the utilities quarterly. If any of the commissioners have some kind of questions about the quarterly, we can try to answer that for you. If not, we can move forward with the presentation on the wastewater CIP.
Mr. Batchelor, this is Tabitha Boatwright, the administrative assistant for utilities. We did have two commissioners who provided questions to the staff.
Good evening, commissioners. My name is Sylvia Santos, engineering managers for water, gas, wastewater. I actually took these questions and kind of work out the answers through the presentation.
Okay.
So, Councilmember Cormack, hi. So I'm here tonight to give you guys an overview of wastewater CIP projects, maintenance program, and system condition.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna just see okay, there you go. So the city sewer system came online in 1898. There are currently 216 miles of sewer mains in the collection system. Back in 1990, council adopted a CIP program to invest in utility infrastructure. For wastewater, 78 miles of sewer mains have been replaced or rehabbed since the first project in 1992. So these 78 miles of pipes are represented in the darker green lines in this image. Most of the pipes were between 75 and 100 years old when they were replaced. So that leaves us with 138 miles of original pipes to focus on. So since the program started in the early 90s, the average replacement rate has been about 2.5 miles per year. This rate was reduced to 1 mile per year recently, mainly due to the large construction cost increase and utility rate stabilization. So we haven't increased rates enough to keep up with the construction costs. With 138 miles of original pipes remaining in the system, we recommend re-evaluating this replacement rate. I will provide you with the background of the pipe condition and explain why we're making this recommendation. So pipe condition assessment is typically done by CCTV inspection. They take an image of inside the pipe and rate each defect. We use the defect scoring and feedback from wastewater operations to prioritize replacement projects. Pipe condition defects are grouped into two categories: operation and maintenance defects and structural defects. In the next few slides, I'll be talking about what they are and how to address them. First, I'd like to show you some CCTV video of sewer main so you can see how we detect defects. This video was taken in 2012. At that time, this pipe was 75 years old. You can see some broken pipe at the top here. As we go down, you will see cracks along the pipe wall on both sides. This next video is for the same pipe, but showing further downstream. You see more cracks along the pipe walls, and there is some more broken pipe coming up at 11 o'clock position here. Unlike the high-density polyethylene pipe we use today with fused joints, the old clay pipe was joined with cement mortar, which deteriorated over time to allow roots to come in. Here you see roots at every 3 feet because the old clay pipe was in 3-foot sections. So this pipe actually got worse since it was videoed. We started getting complaints about sewer smell. Operation requested us to add this pipe onto our CIP project to replace. So it's a good thing we did, because later we found out during construction that some broken section was partially collapsed. That explained why homeowners started smelling sewage. This pipe was replaced in 2017. Here's a quick video showing a sewer main with a chunk missing right here. So this particular pipe is being replaced by contractor on 400 block of West Charleston as part of the current CIP replacement project. So let me summarize the 2 different types of condition defects, the operation and maintenance defects and structural defects. O&M defects typically include root intrusion, cracks, and grease. These defects can be taken care of by routine maintenance activities, but to a certain degree. For examples, operations use hydro flushing and jetting to remove some roots, grease, and debris in the pipe. More stubborn roots in clay pipes may need to be rotted. Chemical root foaming method is used in less accessible areas. And we use CCTV inspection to assess pipe condition in sewer mains and laterals. Utility operations response to service calls, including those ones involving sanitary sewer overflows that require quick responses. They also have a sewer lateral preventive replacement program to replace problematic laterals with repeated service calls or structural defects. For a while, operation utilized contractors to replace these laterals. Until a few years ago, we couldn't find anybody to do the work at a reasonable price. So operations started replacing them again. Then they realized that it was unrealistic to keep up with everything on this list without falling behind on something. So we decided to go back out to hire contractors to do this work. As a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, council approved a new 3-year contract. So the other type of condition defect is structural damage, such as broken pipe or missing sections. So these require replacement because routine maintenance won't fix it. The mechanical devices used for routine maintenance could disturb the broken section to make it even worse. So what happens when broken sections collapse? You could smell sewage, and if there's a blockage, it could create sewer backup into homes, or most likely spills into street and storm drain system, which could be subject to EPA's compliance penalties. When broken section continues to carry away surrounding soil, it could create a void around or above the pipe. Eventually, the street could cave in to create a sinkhole. We believe that the ongoing sanitary sewer replacement projects and routine maintenance program has been effective because the number of sanitary sewer overflow has declined. Years ago, I also heard that the water being treated at the treatment plant has decreased. Over the past decade, utility wastewater operation has been doing a good job planning and implementing routine and preventive maintenance program and purchase adequate equipment to get the job done. The continuous effort has allowed the sewer pipe to be in better shape, so the stoppages are manageable, and we reduce the groundwater infiltration entering the system. it appears that steady replacement, updated equipment, and routine maintenance has been a good investment. So the 138 miles of pipe remaining in the system were installed mainly between 1950s and 70s. If we keep the current replacement rate of 1 mile per year, some of the 1970 pipes will be 190 years old by the time we get to them. Some pipes deteriorate faster than the others. Age may not be the only factor. For example, these images were taken last year from a 70-year-old pipe that was installed in 1952. It already has structural defects. So the remaining 138 miles of sewer mains are between 50 and 70 years old. They're mainly VCPs. What is the life expectancy of clay pipe? It depends on the surrounding soil. Based on our experience, the clay pipes in Palo Alto can last up to 100 years. We have mainly clay soil that expands and contracts. Earth movement causes pipe to crack. We also have a lot of trees. Tree roots could cause pipe to crack and break as well. So to meet the 100-year replacement cycle, we should be looking at the 2.5 mile per year replacement rate. This way, we won't have a big bill to fund when a bunch of pipes become bad at the same time. And most importantly, we can finish replacing these original pipes within 55 years before the pipe exceeds its useful life. So you ask, what happens to the first batch of pipe we replaced in 1992? So these pipes will be only 87 years old in 55 years. These plastic pipes are expected to last up to or more than 100 years. So we could focus on replacing these clay pipes without worrying about the newer pipes. So obviously we cannot achieve this goal without impacting rates. So staff will return in the fall to present a comprehensive rate analysis. But for now, we just want to put this under your radar. Thank you for listening. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Santos. Before we go to commissioner commentary, I realized I had forgotten to ask if there was any public comment on this agenda item. So I just want to quickly ask if there are any members of the public wishing to address the commission on the wastewater CIP.
Press star 9 if you're calling in. There are no hands raised.
All right. Thank you for checking. Let's then move to commissioners. Are there any commissioners wishing to speak? Commissioner Johnston, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. My recollection, and I could be wrong about this, my recollection is that the reason why we reduced the rate at which we were replacing the sewers was really was kind of an emergency measure when we had the really big budget hit during the pandemic, and that we just thought we couldn't continue to spend as much on CIP. But now I would hope that we're past that. It seems to me really critical that we get back on at least the 2.5 miles replacement per year, because I think that the consequences of having one of these sewer systems, sewer pipes fail is very significant. So I would strongly support increasing the CIP allowance so that we could get back on a 2.5 miles per year replacement rate.
Thanks, Commissioner Johnston. Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. Terrific presentation, and thank you for the heads up. On the if we agree the 2.5 miles per year, how long will it take us to replace the additional 138 miles?
55 years.
55 years. Is there any benefit to going beyond 2.5 miles per year, or is that viewed as too aggressive given the fact that we'd have to dig up all the streets?
Yeah, we have to consider the manpower to design and to cover for inspections. Because the more miles you replace, the longer duration the project is. So it will tie up inspectors. So I think
Understood.
2.5 miles per year is a manageable number.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Johnston?
Just to follow up on Commissioner Smith's comment, I mean, I believe the goal here is to get all of the clay pipe BCP replaced before we have to start replacing the pipe that we installed in the 1990s. And I understood from the presentation, which I agree was an excellent presentation. I understood from the presentation that if we increase our rate to 2.5 miles a year and we can replace all the VCP within 55 years, that will be before we have to start replacing the newer pipe. So I think it dovetails pretty well.
Commissioner Bowie, Commissioner Betts? Just want to give you a chance before I chime in. Commissioner Metz, was that waving?
Yes, I was
Go ahead.
trying to take off my mask and raise my hand and do a few other things at once. As I understood from the presentation, Ms. Santos, the two areas are lagging are lateral maintenance due to staff being pulled for emergency work and main replacement, what was just discussed by the other commissioners. So it sounds like they have more background than I do. I just want to understand, what do you recommend that we do in each of those, and what prevents us from doing it now?
So this operations staff was pulled from doing those other activities because for a period of time, they took on the responsibility to replace the laterals. So something has to give. I guess the lateral maintenance was fell behind a little bit, wasn't too much. And also having better tools nowadays to track the activities helps operations to see which area, for example, the main flushing program, they were way ahead of schedule, but they fell behind a little bit for lateral maintenance. So this report and the tools we have now helps them to see, oh, we need to balance the workforce. So that report was generated last year based on 2020 data. So I've talked to operations, definitely they have improved in this area. And with this new 3-year contract for contractors to replace laterals, it definitely will help out. So I think we're pretty good, pretty comfortable that we can reach the goals in all the areas.
If I could add, Commissioner Metz. So in this year's budget that was approved through the AC, we did not add any additional funding for going to this 2.5 miles. We had asked for 1 mile increments as we went through the budgeting process. So the rates were not adjusted to go to this 2.5. As we've been doing more analysis on this sewer, we realized, as Manager Santos mentioned, that as we've been looking at more and more of the videos, we've been noticing that the mains are mostly starting to deteriorate faster than what we expected. So we don't have funding in it for this year, but we will come back and give you some funding options or talk about some funding options that in the fall. And then as we move forward in next year's budget for 24, we will seek ideas from the UAC, as well as then we'll go through finance as well as to the council if we're going to raise some rates generate some additional funding.
Thanks, Director Batchelor. Yeah, my own input is similar to what's already been stated. It seems like a no-brainer that we should get back to the previous rate of replacement. And my only question is similar to Commissioner Smith's: is 2.5 miles a year enough? You know, if imaging has recently allowed us to see that there some of the clay pipes are deteriorating faster than expected, I'm curious if you know, a period of more miles per year is needed, or is it really that convenient that we just go back to the old rate of replacement and that's exactly the right pace?
We feel that it's the right pace because not all the pipes will fail at age 75. Some do last till 100 years. So with operations help, we continue to evaluate the condition of sewer mains so we get feedback from them so we can focus on the ones that deteriorated faster. So we're pretty comfortable with this number at the moment based on our experience.
Okay. And then the other thing is in practice, it would be 5 miles every other year, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And if the increased budget is approved, then would next year be a 5 mile year, or would it take an additional year for those projects to get planned?
If we start having the increased budget in 2014, we actually talked about it with staff that we do have some mains that we already designed. So we definitely can put together a second part of the CIP project. We're going to put one out as planned, but if we get additional funding, we definitely have some pipes that's already designed in the past because we kept dropping them because the budget kept, I shouldn't say the budget kept shrinking, but because construction costs kept increasing, so we were able to do less miles. So we definitely can put out a second part of the CIP project if we get additional funding for FY24.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I feel like we talk about the rising construction costs every time we talk about the budget. So hopefully it won't be a surprise when they're put out to bid that it will be expensive work. All right, Councilmember Cormack, did you have anything you wanted to chime in?
Thank you, Chair Forcell. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention again to slide 11. It's always good to see improvement, and it looks like we're making this, you know, just a safer place for everyone. So congrats. I know that this is not glamorous work, right? But it does make a real difference. So please pass on my thanks to the team that did this work.
Definitely will. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Why don't we move forward then to item number 4, discussion of UAC recruitment and term changes resulting from some changes that City Council made in board and commission timing. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this topic?
Or comments from the public, please raise your hand. There are no hands raised.
All right. So I don't know, is there a staff presentation?
For sales, there is not a staff presentation on this item.
All right. But we all got the packet. So I think basically we just wanted to give commissioners a chance to discuss if there were any questions. The proposed plan, council has decided that all of our terms, which previously would have ended in May, are extended to the following March. That leaves us with this middle year where normally we would have had selection of a new chair and vice chair in June, but we're proposing to pull that forward to be next month in May. just to give that term a little bit, make that term be a little bit longer, because then there will be new officer elections in April of next year after the new commissioners are voted in March. I hope I'm getting all these months right. And furthermore, staff is proposing to select the budget subcommittee earlier than we usually do, just to let the budget subcommittee be part of the budget making process for sort of the whole year when the budget is being planned, instead of coming on later when most of the planning work has been done. And so the proposal is to elect a budget subcommittee, or select a budget subcommittee next month in our May meeting. And also, we're proposing to have a fiber subcommittee, which we have not had in the past. The budget subcommittee has kind of done a lot of extra work on fiber, but we feel like those are two different things and maybe should be separated out. So it does make for that we next month would have a lot of stuff and a lot of hand raising. And so we wanted to put it out there to discuss how the commission feels about moving forward in this way. And yeah, we can take it in any order, or go ahead, Commissioner Smith.
I'm supportive. I think next month is just going to be full of raising hands, but I'm supportive. And I'm very supportive of appointing the budget subcommittee earlier. That give us time to digest, and more importantly, just give us more time to digest and comment. I very much support that. With respect to the fiber subcommittee, I think that's natural for this body. And I think it should be part of this body, particularly if it is a portion of the utilities that will be adopted going forward, assuming everything goes and in the summer.
Yeah, it's just expected to be a lot of work and a lot of activity, and something that maybe a small number of commissioners can take a deeper dive into. Commissioner Johnston.
So I really just second the comments that Commissioner Smith just made. All of this sounds very reasonable to me, and a positive step forward.
Commissioner Bowie?
Yes, I would just echo those statements as well, and also add on that I think this makes sense as well against the SCAP involvement that we're looking at too.
Commissioner Metz, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I had one question I didn't understand. I'm agreeable with what was just discussed. There's a statement in here, once selected, the terms of these members will end on March 31, 2023. Who's that referring to? It wasn't clear to me which commissioners that means.
I think it would be the chair and vice chair, the budget subcommittee, and the fiber subcommittee.
Oh, so terms means not the term as UAC member, but term on those subcommittees
Yes.
or in those jobs.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand. Okay.
Yep. Commissioner Johnston.
Well, I was going to just comment on Commissioner Metz's question. I mean, it is the case that the terms of some of the UAC members have been extended because of this change in the schedule for appointing new members. So to that extent, there are terms that have been extended. And there's a new end date for everybody's term. I mean, it now ends in March, rather than it used to end in May.
Yeah, exactly. And now all these different committees and the officers will be 1-year gigs that will align with the commissioner terms is the goal. You know, and the only thing I'd point out, it sounds like everybody's quite supportive. It is going to make a lot of subcommittee seats, and there's only 7 of us. So we'll see how it goes next month. Hopefully there'll be a fair amount of hand raising, but we also have often had subcommittees of 3, and we might choose to have just a subcommittee of 2 commissioners. So we'll see how that goes. But this meeting is not the one where we make those selections. All right, well, if there's no further commentary, then why don't we go ahead and move on to our last one, which is hand raising today. And this is a follow-up to the study session we had with council last month, where we talked about the 4 different teams that the SCAP is putting together, these working groups on finance, technology, engagement, and community scaling. And the goal here is just to give each of us a chance, if we're interested in one or more of these teams, to indicate that interest. And then Mayor Burt will be putting together the teams, but he's interested to know which UAC commissioners are interested in serving on these working groups. And I guess the thinking is, I see you, Commissioner Smith, I've got one more. And then the thinking, I think, that the UAC commissioners who are on these working groups can hopefully report back to the UAC. And we think a natural place to do that is in the agenda, where we've already got a standing slot for commissioner comments and reports from meetings and events. And just to be clear, it was a little confusing in the packet. This is not an election. We're not going to vote tonight. It's not an action item. The minutes are just going to show who was interested. So with that said, Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
Chair Forcell, I'm very sorry to interrupt. This is Councilmember Cormack. Could I add a few clarifying comments before commissioners?
Please.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
So the terminology for the SCAP structure is a little confusing. So let me just see if I can clarify it. So there's the ad hoc, and that's Mayor Burt, who's the chair, myself, and Councilmember Du Bois. Then there is a working group. The working group does not include anyone from the Utilities Advisory Commission. I think there are about 5 people on it. They attend our monthly meetings in public. Then there are teams. So tonight, when you're talking about working groups, that's not what you're asking to join. You're asking to join a team. Sorry, it's so confusing. I think I finally got it straightened out. So
I think I was using working group and team interchangeably.
Yeah,
so thank you for clarifying. We're just talking about teams.
Yeah. So these are teams, and the teams are composed of, they'll be composed of 4 types of people, okay? On each team, there will be a council member from the ad hoc. On each team, there will be a staff member who is the lead. So the council member and the staff person will be the chairs, essentially, the leads. Let's go with leads of the teams. There are also members from the working group. So that's our 3rd category that are in each of these teams. And then the 4th category will be the hope that some members of the Utilities Advisory Commission may be interested in participating on each of them. Let me just say that community scaling, it's not only to be established. I'm not a fan of the name, which staff knows. So don't worry about that one right now. And let me just give you a little brief overview. The technology team, I believe, is meeting every other week. It is Mayor Burt and Director Eggleston. I should have printed this out, but we'll see if I can do it from memory. Director Eggleston, who are the leads of that team. And that technology includes not only the technology for appliances and electrification, but also grid modernization. And staff is gonna, when I take a breath, you can correct me if I'm missing something. Engagement is community communications and engagement. That is led by myself and Megan Horrigan-Taylor. And then finance is currently led by Councilmember Du Bois, and I don't recall who the staff member was at this moment. So each of these 3 teams will have a different meeting schedule, So, and I realized that it would be helpful to know before you sign up what the meeting schedule is. I don't know how finance will be working. I do know that the technology is every other week and that the communications and engagement is as necessary. So before everyone started volunteering, I just want to give that overview on terminology and structure. Happy to answer any questions if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. That is helpful. And I guess I would put out there, I think for me, it feels like if we're just showing interest right now, maybe we don't have to know the schedule because we'll find out what that is before actually doing it. But I think just knowing what our areas of interest are is a good start. So with all that said, any more questions for Councilmember Cormack? All right. So Commissioner Smith, do you still want to? You had your hand raised some time ago.
Yes, please. Sorry, are you also asking us to preference our working groups?
Yeah, I guess so, or
Okay.
whatever, or any other comments and questions that you have.
Are there 3 working groups? Are there 4? That's my first question. And technology and or community scaling, or is it technology one group and community scaling the second group?
There will be 4 teams. There are currently 3. The 3 are technology, communications and community engagement, and finance. Community scaling is not yet a team, and there are a variety of interpretations about what that will look like. Some people think it's the whole plan, and some people think it's like if we do a pilot. So the 3 that you could join now are finance, community engagement, and technology.
Okay. The one that is of particular interest is finance.
Thanks for that, Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Johnston?
So I don't claim to have any deep expertise in any of these, but I would be interested in the technology. I think technology or the finance.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Bowie?
And we did not plan this ahead of time, but I would raise my hand for engagement and then technology.
Excellent. Commissioner Metz?
Yes, I have an interest in the technology team.
Excellent. I'm embarrassed to say this. I mean, I know others are taking notes. Commissioner Bowie, can you say again what you?
Engagement and technology if needed.
Great. All right. And, I hope there's some other mechanism where Commissioner Siegel and Commissioner Scharf, who aren't here tonight, can weigh in. I guess for my own part, this is also very convenient. I had been interested in community scaling before hearing that it's not a thing. So maybe I'll just have to be patient.
Not yet, not yet.
And yeah, I mean, it sounds like we have lots of volunteers for tech. That's my other area of interest. So, well, this is great. Thank you, everybody, for being willing to dig in on these teams. And we'll just wait for Mayor Burt to follow up. And did I ask for public comment? It's a little bit late in the game, but I do like to go by the book. Are there any members of the public wishing to chime in? All right.
No comments.
All right. Okay, so that brings us to the home stretch here. Are there any commissioner comments and reports from meetings and events? Doesn't look like any of us have been out and about this last month. All right, and then future topics for upcoming meetings. Commissioner Johnston.
So I had two questions on the rolling forecast. One was, I see the reference to a joint UAC City Council study session on fiber in August, and there was some reference to that in the Magellan report. Has a date been set for that? August being a month when a lot of people tend to take time off. I think it would be helpful to get a date set for that.
Commissioner Johnson, that date is set. It's for August 8th.
August 8th, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing that I had hoped to see on the forecast, I got the sense when we had the study session recently with the council that there was a kind of a strong support. Maybe I was just hearing what I wanted to hear. Strong support for the idea of moving forward on the kind of the roadmap for the technology that's going to be for modernizing the grid, to put it simply. And I was hoping we'd get a date on the calendar for at least an update on that project.
Commissioner Johnson, so I agree with you. I heard that as well. And so we have not scheduled that out. We are just in the first start of conversations with a contractor to start looking at a scope of work with them and trying to get a timeline of what we can get for this high level. So we don't have that in place yet. So I did not put it on the calendar yet. But as soon as the scope is done and we can work with this contractor, we'll get a roadmap together.
But I think it's a good idea, Director Batchelor, just to give us periodic reports, where you stand in that process, because as we've now agreed, this is something that the council wants to see us move on.
Absolutely, I agree. I will do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. Sorry, any other topics that I hope I'm not ahead of the curve here. Any other topics that we want to talk about? Is it possible periodically, could we just have regular updates with respect to the count on the fiber hub? It is our, if you will, our outreach to the public. It's important that we understand exactly how much of the public is interested in fiber to the home on a month-by-month basis, and make certain that we are penetrating our neighbors. And if we're not, that's equally telling. It just means that more work is necessary. It'd be great to have regular updates, though, on the count.
Sure, we can do that. And courtesy of Mr. Hoyle, the count currently is 239 on the fiber hub.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've talked before about when we're talking about topics for upcoming meetings, to flag if it needs to be a discussion item or an agenda item, or if it's just an informational. And I think, Commissioner Smith, you're just asking for an informational, like you just want the data on a regular basis.
Yeah, if anything, I mean, we can all do this. It doesn't need to be charted. I just want to know what the number is, right? But as we track on a month-to-month basis, if we show increasing, that's good. If we show decreasing or flat, we have a potential issue, considering the fact that it remains possible that council will review this as a go, no-go decision in August.
So Commissioner Smith, what I can do is, if you'd like to do this on a monthly basis so that we're just not writing just an informational report, I could give that in my GM update if you would prefer.
That'd be great.
All right.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
That's
you.
a great idea. Another bit of information that I remember Commissioner Danaher was always very keen on reminding us that we were asking for is an update on electric vehicle charging deployment. And I don't know if that's needed every month in the director's report, but it is something that it sure would be great to see quarterly. Or however often it's being tracked, if that data can, if you can mention it to us.
Chair Purcell, I believe it's in the quarterly already.
Okay, then
I will recheck that, but that's typically where we were putting it. So.
Then you've caught me not reading the quarterly
No, I
closely
don't know.
enough.
I'm just, I might be making that up too, but.
I will check.
That's where we were putting it in. So.
Yeah.
Recheck that.
All
But
right.
that's where we could put it in there if you'd like.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And the other thing that I'd like to ask about is there 2 items that used to be listed out here in the to be scheduled well, one has fallen off completely and one has changed. There was a request for a discussion of water quality, specifically in response to a member of the public that had written in and spoken in public comment around his concern around total suspended solids as opposed to total dissolved solids. And I think we were hoping to get a follow-up at some point. And like I said, that used to be on the list on the 12-month rolling calendar, and I don't see it anymore. It was Bob Winslow, if you don't remember. And the other one is it's now listed as a 5-year water, gas, wastewater, and electric project review, and it used to be the request was for a 10-year.
So we have started looking at that to pull this report together, but we don't have all the information going back for a 10-year period, but we have solid information for a 5-year going back on all the project reviews.
Okay, I see. Well, if that's going to be the difference between getting to have the report and not, then 5 years is better than 0. So thanks for clarifying.
And then Dave just reminded me that when we come in May to talk about the budget, we will be addressing this project review as well.
Okay, that's perfect. I think it came up best. I think it came up last year in project review. It was basically this feeling that a concern that we planned for a certain amount of projects, and it was to address a feeling that often the next year we hadn't completed the projects that had been planned, and to just kind of dive into that. And is that just a feeling, or does the data show that that's what's happening?
There is some data there that shows that some of the projects did fall off. And there was reasons behind that we can talk about in May.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. Okay, so that'll actually be up there. That'll come off the to be scheduled, and that'll slot into May 2022.
Correct.
All right. Any other suggested topics? I always have to peer, especially at Commissioner Metz is really tiny on my screen. All right. Well,
Chair Purcell, could I add one, please?
Please. Yeah.
So my question is that for future updated meetings, is there a desire from the commission to take a month off in June or July, or even August, even though that commission is going to go to have a study session with the council in August? But is there any desire for any of those 3 months or another month that the commission would like to take off, or would you like to continue for the full 12 months?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I will observe that traditionally we've often we've often skipped either the July or the August meeting. The July meeting hits during the week of July 4th when a lot of people are gone.
Right.
And I think sometimes we've pushed back the July meeting and then taken August off. I don't know if commissioners here tonight have sorted their summer plans yet and have a point of view on this.
While
Go
they're
ahead, Commissioner
thinking-
Smith.
Sorry, Chair Forcell, this is Councilmember Cormac.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll just share that, as everyone knows, the council takes our break in July. So I just encourage you as you do this to think about our staff and when they might be getting a break from, all of us. So I'm not encouraging you to go one way or the other, but I just encouraging you to realize that it's a great deal of work for staff to prepare for these meetings. So aligning that to when the city is doing the rest of their work is just one factor to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point. Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
July would be my preference.
Taking a break
We're
in July.
skipping
Mhm.
July.
Is there any objection? Other commissioners, if we just go ahead and try to make a call that the UAC will take a break for the month of July and return in August? Why don't we make that our suggested plan? Is that enough for you, Director Batchelor?
That's plenty. Thank you, Chair Forcell.
All right. All right. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Good discussion. Great staff reports. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. Thank you both. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Appreciate
Have a
it,
lovely evening,
everybody.
everyone.
See you next month.
And commissioners.
Thank you.